Talking about stock splits yesterday, but I'm going to go back over it. When a stock split occurs, that's where the corporation changes the total number of available shares and adjusts the price so that the total value stays the same. So the individual share prices change and the number of individual shares change, but the market cap, which is the total value of all of the shares, will stay exactly the same. Outstanding shares are the number of shares that are issued for investors. They may not all have been purchased. Companies do hold back shares, but they'll still be considered outstanding shares because they've been issued. And that is originally determined at the time that the company goes public, how many outstanding shares there will be, which is usually in the hundred thousands or millions. It can be even more than that, it can be billions. Just depends. In a traditional stock split, the number of shares goes up, the price per share goes down, and the market cap stays the same. That's sloppy. Hold on, let me fix this. Okay, it's called an A4B split, where A and B are some number. 2 for 1, 3 for 5, 4 for 2, whatever. Okay, and if you have that, like, so in a traditional, we might have a 2 for 1. Okay, and so what will happen at that point is one share turns into 2 shares. And the price gets cut in half. So if it used to be worth $1, one share was worth $1, it's now 2 shares, but it's still going to be, the total value of those 2 shares is still going to be the $1, so they're 50 cents each. And if it got split into 4 shares, they'd be worth 25 cents each. Does that make sense? Sort of like when you take a $20 bill, is the same thing as 2 tens. Oops. Or 4 fives. Like, that's what a stock split is like. The value stays the same, but the number of the actual physical bills that you have is different. They're just not worth the same amount. So number of shares down, and then the price goes up. Again, though, the market cap doesn't change. And so in a traditional stock split, I had the 2 for 1. So 1 share became 2. This would be a 1 for 2. So every 2 shares become 1. And then the price would double. Let me actually write that out in the same line because I'm running out of space. So if I had like 2 shares that were worth $1 each, they would become 1 share worth $2. So it increases the price and reduces the number of shares. Penny stocks. Oh, basically the way you can tell if you're doing a traditional or reverse, if the front number is what it's going to turn into. So if the front number is bigger, it's a traditional, and if the front number is smaller, it's a reverse. Let me, I don't want to say that. This is the final number, the front number. Penny stocks are fun. Penny stocks are currently stocks worth less than $5 a share. Back in the old days when the stock market was relatively new and in the 20s and 30s and stuff, the reason they're called penny stocks is because they were literally pennies. But $5 was worth a lot more back then than $5 is now. So the penny stocks are no longer just worth pennies. They're anything under $5. But it used to be that they were actually just pennies, like 3 or 4 cents or 5 cents or 10 cents each. But again, that's when 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 cents was worth more than it's worth today. 10 cents in the 1920s is probably like, I don't know, $6 in today's money or something. I don't know the exact inflation conversion, but it's different. John Deere Company is instituting a 2-for-1 stock split. Okay, so every 1 share will become 2. Before the split, the market share price was $87.68, and the corporation had 1.2 billion shares outstanding. What is the pre-split market cap? Okay, the market cap is equal to the number of shares times the price per. So we're going to take 1.2 billion times 87.68. So 1.2 billion okay. Okay. And that is going to be let's just double check my math here. 1, 2, 105,216,000,000. That's the market cap. So that's how much the shares of John Deere are worth all total. Just on a little side note, if you have one of those little tiny calculators like I've got in that box over there that are not scientific or whatever, they won't handle this many digits. So here's what you do. You take these zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? And you hold them off to the side. And I'm going to take that 87.68 and I'm going to multiply it by 12. Right here, this 12. So far, okay? So I do 87.68 times 12. And I get 1052.16. Okay, now to convert that into the billions that I need to do, I move this 2, and then I add 6 zeros to take these 8 places. Does that make sense, what I'm doing there? And that'll give me the 105,216, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Matches up to the zeros. So if you have a calculator that won't handle numbers that large, that's a way that you can do it. What is the post-split number of shares outstanding for John Deere? My typo. Okay, so it's a 2-for-1. So this is the new, and this is the old, right? So we had 1, and for every 1, there's now going to be 2. So I'm going to take that 1.2 billion and I'm going to multiply it times 2. And instead of 1.2 billion shares, there's now going to be 2.4 billion. Okay. So every 1 turned into 2. So you multiply it by 2. Make sense so far? I'm going to show another way to do this also. All right, so the post-split market price per share, it was 87 or 68 each. Okay, but that 87.68 used to be for 1 share, and that 1 share got split into 2 shares, but it has to be the same total price. So if I split that into 2 shares, I'm going to divide it by 2. So these 2 shares would be 43.84 each. Does that make sense? So you took that 1 share and you basically cut it in half, like with a pair of scissors, if you could really do that. Like you'd take all the stock shares in the world and you'd cut them in half. And so then they'd be worth half as much. And now there's 2 of them where there used to be 1. Yeah, no? Okay. And then it says how many shares are outstanding. Well, we already know that. That's the 2.4 billion. And then did the market cap change after the split? The answer to that is no. The market cap always stays the same. And we could prove that by multiplying 43.84 times 2.4 billion. And it's going to be the same number that we got before. If you don't want to have to think it through and try to figure out what you have to multiply and divide by, I have a formula. Yay. Okay, so for any A for B split, so A is the first number, B is the second number, for the number of shares, to find out how many shares it'll be after the event has happened, you're going to do A over B times the pre-split number. Okay, so A divided by B and then times the pre-split number. For the price, it's the opposite. B over A times the pre-split price. So B divided by A times the pre-split price will give you the post-split price. So before, after. Let me put that on here. It's before, and this is after. Okay, so we'll use that formula. And I've got Palm Inc. is doing a 1 for 20 reverse stock split. That means every 20 shares is going to turn into 1 share. Okay, so we got a 1 for 20. And the price was 64 cents, and there are 580 million shares. Okay, these would be penny stocks. And the reason they're doing this is because there's going to be 20 of these 64-cent stocks becomes 1 stock. It's going to be worth a lot more money. Okay, so to find, this is A, this is B, this is the pre-split price, and this is the pre-split number of shares. Okay. So to find the post-split number of shares, let's call that post, is going to be A over B, so 1 over 20, times 580 million. Okay. Well, denominators are division, so I can divide 580 million by 20, and that'll give me the answer. Okay, so it'll be 29 million shares now. And then for the post price, I'm going to do B over A. So 20 over 1 times, oops, wrong thing, times 64 cents. So that's 64 cents times 20. So they were worth 64 cents. They're now worth $12.80. And there's 1/20th of the number of shares that used to exist. So a lot less shares floating around out there, but they're worth more money, which makes them look more valuable. But didn't. All right, so there's a stock split, and the share was selling for $2.35, and then after it went to $7.05. So the price went up. Okay. What we know is we know that the post split price is equal to B over A times the pre-split price. Okay, that's from the formulas I just gave you. All right, and at this point, I don't have any information that's going to tell me that anything is different than that one of those is going to be a 1. Right, I have a 2 for 1 or a 1 for 2 or a 1 for 3 or 3 for 1 or 4 for, you know. So what I'm going to do is 705 is greater than 235, correct? So the price went up, which means we're multiplying by a number rather than dividing by a number. Okay, so that means A is equal to 1. So what I have is 705 is equal to B times 235, because B over 1 is just going to be B, correct? So I'm going to divide both sides by 235. And I'm going to find that B is equal to 3. So this was a 1, 4, 3 split. A, B. Now you don't have to set up this algebra. If you want, you can just try to, do the division. 735, do the new price divided by the old price. If the new price is higher. And you can do the old price divided by the new price if the new price is, or if the old price is higher. But you have to remember which one of these is going to be the 1. Does that make sense? So if the new price is higher, the 1 goes in front. If the old price is higher, the 1 would go in the back. Okay. Now, okay, this is okay, so a fractional part of the sale happens if, so let's say the company does a stock split and it's an odd number, because that can happen, because that A and B number can be like anything that they decide. Well, if that happens and it's an odd number, it may not divide evenly, and so you get like a remainder or a fraction. So a piece of a stock. So let's say you had 3 stocks in your hand, and then they did some weird stock split, and now you have 7.5 stocks. You're not allowed to have a half stock. You're only ever allowed to have like a full stock. Okay, so pieces of stocks are not okay. So what happens is the corporation has to buy the piece of a stock from you. So if your 3 shares became 7.5 shares, then what's going to happen is the corporation is going to buy that half a share from you for the value of half a share. So if the share was worth $10, they're going to give you 5. And now you only own 7 shares. Okay? Does that make, so like if you had, let's say you had 7.5 shares and they're worth $10 each, you're not allowed to have half the share, so the corporation will send you a check for $5 and buy that half a share back from you. Okay? Just because parts of share, like sometimes when you do math, you get uneven numbers. I don't know if you guys were aware of that. But you know, even like there's word problems where you've got like people needing to go on a field trip, and so you figure out how many buses you need, and you need 4.25 buses. Well, you can't have 4.25 buses. No quarters of buses driving down the street, right? You'd have to have 5 whole buses at that point. Well, this is the same thing. You can't have a part of a stock. You either have a whole stock or you have no stock. But when they do these splits, sometimes it works out that people end up with pieces of stocks. It can be 1/10 of a share, or 7/8 of a share, or something weird. But the corporation is not legally allowed to do anything in a stock split that causes you to lose or gain money. It has to be a non-event, right? Like your value has to stay the same. So they have to buy those pieces of stock from you. So if you end up, like I said, with 7.5, they buy the half from you and you only have 7, but the money value stays the same because they gave you money for that half that they buy from you. So then you have the 7 shares of stock and the cash. Does that make sense? Okay. So this happens to this guy Steve right here, and he owned 942 shares of Graham Corporation, and then they did a 5-for-4 split, which is like one of those odd splits that's not going to result in a nice even number. And it was selling for $56 per share before the split, and we want to see how he was financially affected. Okay, so we're going to do the whole thing. He was doing a 5-for-4. Okay, so this is A, and this is B, and he has 942 shares, and they are $56 each. That's the pertinent information. Okay, so our post-split price, go back real quick. Post-split price is B over A times the pre-split price. So B over A times the pre-split price of $56. Now I cannot divide, or this 4/5 does not go evenly into 56, so I'm going to do 4 times 56 and divide it by 5. That's the process that I'm going to do there. And they're going to be worth $44.80 each. That's the new post-split price.
Multiplication symbol, not a decimal, correct?
Yeah, sorry, I should raise it higher. That's a very good point. Oh, whoa, that's way too big of an eraser. Let's go little eraser. That's like up here. Better? Yeah. Okay, now the post-split number of shares We go back real quick, is A over B times the pre-split number. Oops, went too far. So I'm going to do 5 over 4 times 942. That's how many shares he owned. So that's 5 times 942 divided by 4. And so he now has 1,177 and a half shares. But he can't have half a share. So this gets bought. At fair market price, which is 44.80 times 0.5. So they give him a check for $22.40. Okay. So he now has He now has 1,177 shares worth $44.80 each and $22.40. Because they'll send him a check for $22.40 and he no longer has that half a share. Now, if we compare the value, how is he financially affected? Before, he had 942 times 56, which was 52,752. And after, he has 1177 times 44.80 plus 22.40, which is going to equal 52,752. He is not financially affected.
Is that 22.40?
Yeah, I ran out of space. Okay. Purchasing and selling stocks, so buying and selling, you buy low, sell high, is one way to make money off a stock. And the money you make is in that capital gain that you get when the stock price is higher and you sell. But the other way you can earn money off of stocks is through dividend income. Okay? And as a stockholder, you're an owner of the company. Okay? So every single person that owns stock in Netflix owns Netflix. The stockholders are the owners of the company. There's not some random private person that owns Netflix. There's probably a billion people that own Netflix. And as owners, you're entitled to part of the profits. And so what happens is they pay dividends. Okay, so the dividends are a portion of the profits paid to the shareholders as owners. Now, dividends aren't always paid. A lot of times the company reinvests their profits back into the company. But then periodically they do pay out dividends, and there's all different ways that that's all calculated. But the profit is shared. And so let's say it's Netflix, and let's say there's exactly 1 billion shares of stocks out there, and they take whatever the company's profits are. Let's say the company's profit was exactly $1 billion. That makes the division in my head really easy, right? So they made a profit of $1 billion. There's exactly 1 billion shares out, so they divide that 1 billion by the billion. So each share gets $1 dividend. And so how much money you get would depend on how many shares you had. If you owned 5 shares, you'd get $5. If you owned 1,000 shares, you'd get $1,000. Okay, and that's called dividend income. And it is considered to be income because you're getting it as an owner of a company, and so you do have to report it on your taxes. And the amount of the dividends, it depends. Like I said, if Netflix had 1 billion shareholders and they made $1 billion, then each share of stock would get $1 worth of dividends. But if they did not make $1 billion profit, but they still had 1 billion shareholders or share stocks, then each share of stock would get way less than $1. Like if they had $1 million profit and 1 billion shares of stocks, those would only get like 10 cents each. Did I just do that right? Maybe it was a penny each. Not a lot of money. That's basically the point. So it can range from less than $1 to thousands, and it all depends on how many shares of stocks there are and what's the profit margin, and then how many shares of stocks do you own. Okay. Now, not all types of stocks and not all companies pay dividends. It's income stocks that are the stocks that pay dividends. And you can, if you're actually purchasing stock in the real world, then you can investigate and research and find out which companies do or don't pay dividends. If you want to buy stock that's going to earn you some dividends, you get a check in the mail every once in a while, then you look for those companies that do and buy stock in those companies. Okay, the yield is the percent Okay, so the yield is the percent of the dividend compared to the current price per share. So if you earned $1 dividend per share and the shares were $5 each, that would be a 20% yield. Okay. What do you want the yield from? Is you look at the percent yield because that's used to compare if your money is better invested or put into some sort of like savings. Okay, now that example I just gave, a 20% yield, your average savings account is 1% or less right now. So your money would be earning you more money getting this 20% yield on the dividends. But if the yield was like half of, like 0.0005%, well, then you'd be better off putting your money in a savings account, which is going to get you about 1%. So that's what you use. You look at the price, the dividend, and you look at the yield, which gives you the percent, and you compare that to other investment options like savings accounts, CDs, money market accounts, and you pick the one that's going to grow your money the most. All right, growth stocks. These are for if you're not concerned with dividend income. You know, this is when you're buying and selling. Okay. So there's the growth stocks. Those are the stocks that are going up in value, and so you're buying them when they're low and you're selling them when you're high, and you're making your money that way. You don't care about the dividends. If you care about the dividends, it's usually more of a long-term investment. So you're going to buy money in a company that you know is going to be around, you know is doing well, you know they pay dividends. You just put your money there and you let it sit, and you earn money off the dividends. And stocks can be both. It can be both growth and income. Okay. The other thing, you've got two types of stock. There's preferred stock and common stock. Okay. Preferred stock is usually given by the company. Not really, it's really difficult to buy preferred stock out there. Mostly the stock you buy on the stock market is common stock. Preferred stock is usually given to board members or people in the company, presidents, vice presidents.
What would that be like,
Publix is private.
private stock?
Yeah, private stock, so that can only be gifted. Preferred stock can be bought if somebody that owns preferred stock wants to sell it, but it's not that. It's not as common. It doesn't happen as often. And usually, like I said, it's given to like board members. It's given to employees. It's usually a higher price. But whenever you own preferred stock, the dividends are paid first. Okay, and then it's usually a set amount. Okay, so like if they say the dividend on the preferred stock is $100, then that's what you're going to get, $100. Now, if you have common stock, that's the kind of stock that most everybody gets when they buy stock in the stock market. Okay, the dividends are paid second. If there's money left over after the preferred, and if the board of directors decides to issue them. Okay. So preferred stockholders get dividends more often and usually a higher amount. And then the common stockholders get dividends if after the preferred stockholders' dividends have been paid, there's profit left over, and if the board decides to release it. Okay, the other benefit of being a preferred stockholder is if a company goes under, it's liquidated, and what that means is they sell off everything, the equipment, the office furniture, the building, like any assets that the company has gets sold off, and that all goes into an account. And out of that account, first any creditors get paid, so anybody that the company owed money to gets paid. And then if there's anything left after that, the preferred stockholders get that. And then if there's anything left after the preferred stockholders get their amount, then the common stockholders would get whatever, crumbs were left over. I would have to say that it's very rare that a common stockholder would get any of those crumbs, because if a company is going under, it's very unlikely that their assets are worth more than they owe. Do you know what I mean? So that doesn't happen often. Okay, Roberta is thinking about buying common stock that pays an annual dividend of $2.13 per share. If she purchased 700 shares for $45.16 per share, what would her annual income be from the dividends? Now, this one gave you too much information. We want to know annual income from dividends. We don't need to know how much they are per share. We need to know the dividend, and we need to know the number of shares. So dividend income So I'm going to take that $2.13 and I'm going to multiply it by the 700 shares that she buys. And she's going to get $1,491 per year. Okay. You only need to know this information here, the per share price, if you're doing the yield. Okay. Elsie owns 2,000 shares of a corporation that pays a quarterly dividend of 51 cents per share. Okay, quarterly happens 4 times per year. Okay, just like in a dollar, 4 quarters. Right, so she's going to get 2,000 shares times 51 cents per share dividend. So that's going to be $1,020 per quarter. And there's 4 quarters per year, so she's going to get that 1020 4 times per year, and that's going to give her $4,080 per year.